Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, let's do it. Gonna do a few videos. Maybe not in one record, and not in. I'll split it. Who knows? Hi, how are you? My name's Connor. If you are new, that rhymed, didn't it? Great intro, classic. Original link to the video, top of the description. Right below that, link to the Discord. Click on it, sends you right over there. Some of you guys have been telling me, mainly on Discord, and something I've been a little bit, not worried, but noticed too, is the quality of, like, the video quality of my videos the past, like, week has been a bit off, and I think I messed something up in my settings on OBS Studio, and so I'm trying to get it back to normal, so I hope it's not too bad. Trial and error. What else can I do? Okay, let's do it. Why didn't Britain have a revolution in 1848? I keep thinking 1849 was the big year, and it's not. 1848. Preemptive like. So, the big thing about 1848 revolution is sort of connected to the Industrial Revolution, and yet there was still a lot of leftovers that, like, serfdom and different classes and whatnot that was left over from prior to, you know, steam engine and whatnot, and more physical labor jobs where serfdom was. And anyways, let's go. I'm still learning.
1848 was a pretty rough year for many European rulers. It saw revolutions in places like France, the German Confederation, the Austrian Empire, and Sardinia. The revolution sought to improve living conditions, settle nationalist questions, and fix government deficiencies. And despite having problems with all of these, Britain did not have a revolution or even an attempt at one.
Always got to read the if there are ever words on the screen that quickly go by, it's always good to, sometimes, not always, to go back. It's sometimes funny.
Despite having problems with all of these, Britain did not have a revolution or even an attempt at one in 1848. Which raises the question, why? Why was Britain spared a revolution when much of Europe wasn't so lucky? So, to begin, despite not having a revolution, the British people shared many of the same grievances with their government as those across the Channel. Industrialisation had seen the rise of poor working conditions. Many were annoyed at the lack of political representation, and in Ireland and Wales there were many who felt aggrieved by the way Westminster was running things. Much of this sprang from the 1832 Reform Acts, which notably expanded the electorate, but only to landowners and a few others, meaning most men still couldn't vote, which unsurprisingly upset them. Opposition began to organise via working men's clubs whose members called for more rights and better conditions. Leaders of these clubs, along with some members of Parliament, met to draft what was called the People's Charter. This pushed for the British government to radically change the way that Parliament worked. So after the Charter was published, it was promptly ignored. This was mostly because doing so worked. So
the People's Charter, things could suck less, you know. Okay.
After the Charter was published, it was promptly ignored. This was mostly because doing stuff is annoying and the current system worked well for everyone in power, so why bother? Tensions rose over the following decade and the government had to deal with riots and strikes across the country. The leader of the Chartist movement, Fergus O'Connor, was elected an MP in 1847 and promptly began to demand change in the House of Commons. Nothing did change though, and when news reached Britain about the revolutions abroad, the Chartists saw their chance. O'Connor arranged for a large march to carry a petition to Parliament, which organisers claimed...
Am I right here? It was... Do you think, like, Russia was horrendously bad? But do you think that Britain was comparatively more progressive in this... how the monarchy and social systems work? Obviously, I'm not saying that it's like today level of like progressive work conditions, obviously, but do you think they were slightly more ahead of the curve, and so there wasn't as fierce of a showing and wanting to overthrow anyone because they were a little bit more ahead of the curve, or am I completely wrong? I might be.
Chance. O'Connor arranged for a large march to carry a petition to Parliament, which organisers claimed had over 5 million signatures, which for a nation of 26 million people was quite a lot. The government got wind of this, and remembering what happened in France, they wanted to be sure that there was no threat to the British government or the Crown. And they knew that the presentation to Parliament was when the danger of revolution would be at its greatest. Headed by the Duke of Wellington, soldiers were placed all across London just out of sight of the be at its greatest.
Why did it change to the flag of... What flag is that? Hungary? No, it's not Italy. Italy is... If that was, like, on its side. What flag is that?
Headed by the Duke of Wellington, soldiers were placed all across London just out of sight of the planned route, and thus they wouldn't be provoking anyone, but they'd be able to respond if anything went wrong. The government also hired an extra 100,000 special constables, who were voluntary police officers whose training consisted of "here's a truncheon, go hit someone with it." Interestingly, among the 100,000 officers recruited were former Prime Minister Robert Peel and some guy called Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, who would later go on to
Oh, this guy, you're so amazing.
were former Prime Minister Robert Peel and some guy called Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, who would later go on to find gainful employment in France. These extra men would prove unnecessary though, since the March on Parliament would never happen. The Chartists weren't planning to violently overthrow the government, and their leaders had faced down troops before, so why didn't they march? It wasn't muskets or truncheons that stopped them, it was the rain. You see, rights and reforms were important, but nobody wanted to fight for them whilst...
It's England! I thought you would be, more than anyone in the world, would not be upset by a little rain.
Wet them. It was the rain. You see, rights and reforms were important, but nobody wanted to fight for them whilst wet. And with the coming of the rain, the demonstrators just sort of went home. The petition was delivered to Parliament by a couple of Chartists and was promptly ignored.
That is too suspicious. There's no way. Something is not being said.
Home.
They left? Oh, it was raining. It's England. When is it not?
The petition was delivered to Parliament by a couple of Chartists and was promptly ignored. Turns out most of the signatures were forgeries, and the Chartists...
hold on. I always read the newspapers. Workers' News, April 11th, 1848. Chartists found to be frauds. Hand false petition to Parliament. After an uneventful march yesterday, Chartists, a.k.a. those evil guys who want to ruin this great country, threatened to march... Come on. Sir. Threatened to march on Parliament. Presumably, this was to burn it down and kill everyone inside. The movement's leaders, fools that they are, overestimated the support the malicious group had to upend the Constitution of the UK. Once realizing they made fraudulent claims as to the popularity of their charter, upon closer inspection, the petition didn't have the 5 million signatures claimed, but only 2 million. It's still a lot. Thus, it shall be ignored. Insane man... Okay, next story. Insane man dragged into sanatorium. An unnamed gentleman has been taken into the protective custody of the London West Sanatorium today after publicly expressing provocative and damaging views. His claim was that maybe we shouldn't work children to death and, like, teach them or something. You stupid moron. What happened to him? Alright, taken to the good. What do you mean? Home Secretary George Gray responded to these outlandish comments. He's clearly bonkers. But fortunately, we've got sticks to knock some good sense into him. No one thinks this is abusive, by the way. Denmark and Prussia at war. It hasn't been long since Prussian leadership demanded Denmark leave Schleswig with the ultimatum of, you want to go, bro? Denmark-Prussia war. It hasn't been long since Prussian leadership demanded Denmark leave Schleswig with the ultimatum, you want to go, bro? Because I'm game. Turns out the Danish king is up for a scrap and war is broken out. More on page 1295.
forgeries, and the Chartist movement was so thoroughly embarrassed that it never recovered. The chance for revolution was gone, but in the end, most of the Chartist demands were adopted by the British Parliament eventually. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and a special thanks to my patrons.
He doesn't say thank you for watching. I always love that. I would always say thank you for making. Thank you for making. I was laughing
just
too much to even hear the end.
Important, but nobody wanted to fight for them whilst wet. And with the coming of the rain, the demonstrators just sort of went home. The petition was delivered to Parliament by a couple of Chartists and was promptly ignored. Turns out most of the signatures were forgeries, and the Chartist movement was so thoroughly embarrassed that it never recovered. The chance for revolution was gone, but in the end, most of the Chartist demands were adopted by the British Parliament eventually. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and a special thanks.
We have 5 million signatures. Nobody check to see if we just made it up. Cool video, guys. Awesome. Sorry for my awful English accent. We're cool, right? Love you guys. See you next time. Bye.